We hear all about endangered animals, but are endangered trees a thing? Do trees go extinct as often as animals? The jack pine has been suffering from forest fire reduction efforts of the past century. It is fire adapted. Its cones are sealed for years until extreme heat melts their coating and they can reseed on the open ground left by a stand clearing fire. Odds are no one will see this, and it's not the most relevant or an answer, but please people, do not bring wood from somewhere anywhere else. Doesn't matter if you're burning it right away or not. Traveling firewood is one of the biggest ways that certain insects can spread to new forests to devastate them. There are also endangered flowers as well. One is the Schweinitz's sunflower, Helianthus schweinitzii. I work in natural resources, and every year we have a flower count to see how many individual flowers have bloomed. Last year we had around 1,600 flowers. It was a great year. A prehistoric species of metasequoia was previously thought to be extinct after the last ice age made everything too cold for it. However, a small grove of about 100 trees was discovered somewhere in China, and the tree has been repopulated. So yeah, every species of plant and animal suffers the same risks of extinctions, but trees aren't cuddly, so no one talks about it. My hometown is one of the only areas in the country with native elm trees. Dutch elm disease spread and killed most others, but the beetles that spread it couldn't get past the range of hills. Every now and then, some bastard wrings the bark off of one and kills it, and the number of mature elm trees goes down again. Here, living in New Zealand, we are suffering from kauri dieback, which affects one of our most amazing native trees, which is capable of living long after 1,000 years old. We currently can't walk on many of our reserve walkways due to trying to reduce the effect of the kauri dieback. The American chestnut is still around in New England, but effectively sterile. They are unaffected by the disease until they get large enough for cracks to appear in the bark. The disease kills the tree above ground, but it can still resprout from the root, and the cycle begins again. It's very sad. In Toronto, they wiped out this one breed of tree because it was carrying and spreading a tree disease. They were worried it would mutate and affect other trees. All the trees that they planted in front of the houses in my town nearby were pulled out and replaced with maples. Yes. Check out the example of the Judean date palm, which had been extinct for more than 800 years. Sometime during 1963 to 1965, excavations of Herod the Great's palace on Xa-0 Masada, Israel, revealed a cache of date palm seeds preserved in an ancient jar. In 2005, scientists successfully sprouted and planted one of the seeds. The plant is named Methuselah and is still alive today. Here in Michigan, and, from what I've heard, also in nearby Ontario, Canada, the emerald ash borer is systematically killing off our ash trees, and I honestly don't know if there are any means, or even any plans, to save them. Mahogany and lignum vitae, to my certain knowledge, are heavily controlled. They are simple, wonderful wood and very valuable. They are also slow growing. Because they are so valuable, they were almost wiped out by logging and are now protected by sites. The wood used now needs to be recycled or sustainably farmed by law, although there is smuggling. There is this beautiful wattle tree called Acacia phlebophilia. Super endangered, but also only grows on this one tiny mountain. My partner and I went to the mountain a few years ago and they were everywhere, but since going there recently, the population had dramatically decreased. My partner, who is obsessed with these trees and botanist, thinks it's because of disease. We have news about certain of our trees being endangered every now and then in the local media. Central Europe, ash trees are countrywide endangered by a fungus, elm trees have already been almost wiped out, spruce trees suffer since years from an ongoing bark beetle plague, and Asian pests are more and more found that threaten entire forests once they can make it through winter. I know live oaks are in trouble in central Texas due to oak wilt. My neighbor, an older man around 70, told me Tymes A&M introduced it in our neighborhood in Georgetown about 39 years ago to study its effects. Now nearly the whole area's oak community that remains is sick or dying. I think there must be because of selective breeding of particular species of food crops. For example, there is a variety of rice found in India that can be sown on mountain soil without much water required. But such variety is hard to find because of the variants that used for farming purpose. So yeah, not only trees but also a lot of plants do go extinct. Yes, but at least seed banks exist. With the ash tree here in the States, they suggest cutting down to ash trees and burning them close by to try to keep the ash borer from spreading. Then once the ash borer are hopefully gone, reintroduce the ash trees. The red tip ornamental tree was wiped out in the SEUS in the 90s due to a fungus. This tree is the type people would plant along property lines for privacy and such, and within a decade it went from everyone having one or more in their yards to being wiped out in this region. You can get fungus-resistant ones, but the chances of it surviving here is slim now. Forestry student here, Yes, trees suffer from many diseases that can wipe out entire populations. You don't hear about it because there are relatively fewer tree species than other things, and people also don't care as much about them. Another one that people don't think of, bacteria. Scientists fear we, in the West, have already experienced a great extinction. No one knows because there is no central database. What is known is that samples from Amazonian tribes, and elsewhere, show far greater diversity than what is in ours. Not only are there endangered trees, there are also invasive trees. New Zealand has a major problem with pine trees, which were brought to the islands because they're great for wood farms. But then they escaped and have been rapidly out-competing the native foliage and taking over. Plants in general go just as endangered as animals. However, because many species can naturally breed with themselves and most seeds can be stored fairly easily for almost ever, the danger of losing a species entirely is greatly diminished. No, simply because they are asexual. Any bee or bee-like creature can come and aid in reproduction, whereas animals have to wait for a mate. There's more competition among mates, and because more often are there predators and food scarcity, while the only requirement for plants is water. From California here, sudden oak death is wiping out several species of oaks on the west coast. Our native fan palm species are near threatened and suffer from fungus, boring beetles, and a South American weevil. There's a tree I saw in the Singapore Botanic Gardens that was one of only a half dozen left and the only one accessible to viewing by the general public. All the ones left are too far away from each other to cross-pollinate, and scientists haven't even figured out what its pollinator is. It's possible its pollinator is already extinct. Lots of talk about diseases, but no one is really explaining where these diseases come from. How does it evolve and spread so wide, and is it our fault that worldwide blights happen? People go crazy when there is a flu epidemic and we go to all sort of extraordinary lengths to prevent it. Why don't we even do minimal efforts to save trees, the lungs of our planet, from dying?